What's up guys, welcome back. So till now we have discussed about the taxable event under GST, meaning and scope of supply under GST, and about the composition scheme. So this is our fourth video of the Q&A series, and in this video we will discuss about the reverse charge. Specifically we will discuss about every single practical aspect relating to the reverse charge, and the aspect would be like what exactly is the reverse charge, who are required to pay tax under the reverse charge, what exactly is the time of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge, whether the recipient of goods or services need to issue any invoice, whether the recipient of goods or services can claim or take the input tax credit, what will be the implication in case of a reverse charge, and the person who are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme. And there will be also lot of practical aspect relating to the GST in case the person is under the reverse charge scheme or the reverse charge compulsion. So this is gonna be very interesting topic. So without any further delay, let's start. So this is our first question of this Q&A, and the question is, what is a reverse charge? So the reverse charge is defined under section 2 subsection 98 of the CGST Act. The reverse charge is a charge in which the liability to pay tax to the government is of the recipient of supply of goods or services instead of supplier of goods or services. So when you fall under the reverse charge compulsion, then the recipient of supply of goods or services is required to pay tax under the GST instead of supplier of goods or services. So it is just the opposite of the normal provision where the supplier of goods or services is required to pay tax. So when you fall under the reverse charge, then the recipient of supply of goods or services need to pay tax to the government. The next question is very important for this Q&A, and the question is, under which situation or transaction reverse charge is applicable? So this is about the applicability of the reverse charge, that under which situation or under which transaction the reverse charge is applicable. So there are three situations in which you need to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism. The first one is under section 8 subsection 4, and it says, when a registered person receives the supply of goods or services from an unregistered person, then he need to pay the tax under the reverse charge mechanism. So when a registered person, so what exactly is the meaning of a registered person? So if you are registered under the GST or are required to register under GST, then you will call a registered person. And who exactly is the unregistered person? The unregistered person is those who are not required to register under GST because the GST is not applicable to them, or because his turnover is below the 20 lakh rupees, or his whole supply of goods or services is exempted from tax under GST. So when a registered person receives the supply of goods or services from an unregistered person, then the recipient or the registered person need to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism. And the second situation is defined under section 8 subsection 3. It says that the government notify the category of supply of goods or services on which the reverse charge can be applicable. So the government has the power to notify any supply of goods or services on which they can say that the reverse charge will be applicable. So in this one, the government will notify by way of a rule or by way of a notification. So till now there is no notification, and the date of recording this video is 2nd May 2017. So till 2nd May 2017 there is no notification or there is no rule relating to the reverse charge. So there can be a situation in which the reverse charge can be applicable on certain category of supply of goods or services which the government may notify. So you have remember that under the service tax law there are a lot of category of services on which the reverse charge was applicable, like GTA or the goods transport agencies, insurance agent, the legal suppliers of services, and renting of immovable, renting of bus or motor vehicle, and sponsorship services. So there are a lot of services on which the reverse charge was applicable either wholly or partly. So similarly, the government has the power to notify any category of supply of goods or services on which the reverse charge can be applicable. So till now there is no notification or the rule, so we can't say about this kind of a person that who exactly are the kind of a category of person or the category of supply goods or services on which the reverse charge is applicable. And the third one is not much relevant for you because it is defined under section 8 subsection 5, and it says that the government notifies the category of services the tax on intra-state of which paid by the electronic commerce operator if supplied through it. So it is about the electronic commerce operator. So who exactly are the electronic commerce operator? Electronic commerce operator is like the Flipkart, eBay, Amazon or Paytm. So the government can notify the certain category of services only, not the good, certain category of services, the intra-state supply of which, only intra-state supply of which can be paid by the electronic commerce operator. So in this, the reverse charge will be only applicable to the electronic commerce operator and on the supply of certain category of a service, and the supply of service should be intra-state. So there are three conditions on which if you fall into this category will be applicable. First one is that you should be electronic commerce operator, and then there is a certain kind of a services of the goods, and then the supply should be intra-state. So if three conditions are followed, then only you will be liable to pay tax under the reverse charge. So there are three situations in which the reverse charge will be applicable under the GST. First one is when the registered person receive the supply of goods or services from an unregistered person, and second one is that the government may notify the certain category of goods or services on which the reverse charge will be payable, and the third one is about the electronic commerce operator when they supply the services intra-state only, then those will be paid tax under the reverse charge scheme. The next question is related to the applicability of the reverse charge on the goods, and the question is reverse charge applicable only to the services? So the answer is no. The reverse charge is also applicable to the goods also, because section 2 subsection 90s define the reverse charge as a charge in which the liability to pay tax is of the recipient of supply of goods or services instead of supplier of goods or services. So the word is goods or services. It's not that the supplier is not that the recipient of goods only or the recipient of services. The word is the liability to pay tax under this act is of the recipient of supply of goods or services. So there are both words in the section 2 subsection 98, both goods or services. So the answer to the question that is reverse charge is only applicable to services, so answer is no. The reverse charge is also applicable to the goods as equal as the applicability of reverse charge is on service. The next question is related to the aggregate turnover, and the question is whether receipt of supply of goods or services taken into account for calculating the aggregate turnover. So the question is relating to the aggregate turnover, that whether the receipt of supply of goods or services on which the reverse charge is applicable can be taken into the account for calculating the aggregate turnover. So the answer is no, because section 2 subsection 6 defines the meaning of the aggregate turnover, and it says that the aggregate turnover means the aggregate value of supplies of all taxable goods or services, but excluding the value of inward supply of goods or services on which the reverse charge is applicable. So section 2 subsection 6 itself exclude the supplies on which the reverse charge is applicable. So when the recipient of supply of goods or services receive any supply of goods or services in which the reverse charge is applicable, then it is exclusively excluded from the definition of aggregate turnover. But the question is why we are discussing about the aggregate turnover and what is the practical implication of aggregate turnover. So the aggregate turnover is very important, and it is also very important for determining the registration, that whether you want to get yourself registered under GST or if you are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme. So the aggregate turnover is very helpful for determining the applicability of the GST, because in case your turnover exceed the 20 lakh rupees in the financial year, if your aggregate turnover exceeds the 20 lakh rupees in the financial year, then you need to get yourself registered under GST. And the aggregate turnover is also very important for determining that whether you can opt for the composition scheme or not. So the applicability of composition scheme is that your aggregate turnover should be up to 50 lakh rupees in the preceding financial year. So the question is very important, that whether the inward supply of goods or services on which the reverse charge is applicable is taken into account for calculating the value of aggregate turnover. So the answer is no, because it is exclusively excluded from the definition of the aggregate turnover which is provided under section 2 subsection 6, and the aggregate turnover means the aggregate value of supplies of goods or services, but it is exclusively excluded the value of inward supply of goods or services on which the reverse charge is applicable. And the next question is relating to the registration if the person is paying tax under the reverse charge mechanism. And the question is whether the person who is required to pay tax under the reverse charge need to compulsorily register themselves. And the answer is yes. If you are required to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism, then you need to compulsorily register under the GST in any situation. Section 24 clause 3 starts with that, notwithstanding with anything contained in section 22. And section 22 says that if your aggregate turnover is exceeding 20 lakh rupees, then only you need to register yourself under GST. So in case of a reverse charge mechanism, so in case you are required to pay tax under the reverse charge, then you don't need to look into the aggregate turnover. You have to compulsorily register yourself under GST whether your turnover is below 20 lakh or above 20 lakh. So the benefit of 20 lakh rupees of turnover is not available in case you are required to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism. And who are required to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism, we have just talked about it in the previous question, that there are three categories of person who are required to pay tax under the reverse charge. First one is when the registered person receives the goods or service from an unregistered. Second one is that when the central government notify specific categories of supply goods or services on which the liability to pay tax is on the recipient of supply goods or services. And the third one is about the electronic commerce operator, when the central government specify those supply of services only, and those supply services should be interested, then the electronic commerce operator need to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism. So if you need to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism, then you are required to compulsorily register under GST. And the section which talk about the compulsorily registration under GST is section 24 clause 3. The next question is about the implication of the reverse charge on the person who are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme. And the question is, what are the implications of reverse charge on the person who are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme? So what is the composition scheme? The composition scheme is a scheme in which a person has the option to pay tax under this scheme if you have the aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year up to 50 lakh rupees. And the benefit of the composition scheme is that you don't need to collect the CGST, SGST or IGST from the person. You have to only pay the tax at the rate of 0.5% in case of a supplier of goods or services or the trader, 1%, 0.5% in case of a trader, 1% in case of a manufacturer, and the 2.5% in case of a restaurant owner. and that is only the rate of the SGST. The effective rate is for trader 1%, for manufacturer 2%, and in case of a restaurant owner it is 5%. If you want to know more about the benefit of the composition scheme, then check out my other video. I have covered in detail about it, and the link of that video is also given down in the description. So the benefit of the composition scheme is that you don't need to collect the tax, you don't need to pay the higher rate of tax, or you don't need to maintain the books of account of various kind of ledgers, like the ledger of tax liability ledger, ledgers of inputs, ledgers of credit, ledgers of output tax liability. So there are a lot of compliance easier. You don't need to comply with a lot of burden with the GST law put into the normal person. So simply put, if you are opting to pay the tax under the composition scheme, you are in the benefit. And the question was that what will be the implication in case the person who has the compulsion to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism. So if you are a person who are also required to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism, and you are also a person on which you are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme, so you are under the composition scheme and you are also required to pay under the reverse charge mechanism, then what will be the implication of reverse charge mechanism on the composition scheme owner? So the one of the condition, there are a lot of conditions or the restriction on the happening of which only the option to pay tax under the composition scheme can be allowed, and one of the condition and the restriction is given under rule number 3 clause 1 point number D of the composition rule. So rule number 3 of the composition rule and clause number 1 of rule number 3 and point number D talks about one of the condition to opt for the composition scheme, and the condition is that he shall pay tax under subsection 3 or subsection 4 of section 9 on inward supply of goods or services received from an unregistered person. Subsection 3 or subsection 4 of section 9 was about the reverse charge mechanism, on which the reverse charge mechanism is applicable. So one of the condition was that he shall pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism on inward supply of goods or services received from the unregistered person. So that is one of the condition to get the composition scheme. So it means that he has to pay the tax under the reverse charge mechanism, then only he can be available, or the option to pay the tax under the composition scheme can be available. So if he violate the condition, if he don't pay the tax under the reverse charge mechanism due to ignorance or due to other kind of reason, due to fraud, due to misstatement, due to like he don't want to pay the tax because he want that why should I pay, because reverse charge is just injustice to them, they consider it. So if they think about it, or if he fraudulently don't pay the tax under the reverse charge mechanism, and when the GST official pointed out that he are not paying the tax under the reverse charge mechanism, then his scheme or his benefit to pay tax under the composition scheme will be lapsed from the day when he is required to pay the tax under the reverse charge mechanism. So simply put, he need to pay, he gotta pay the tax under the reverse charge mechanism so that he can continue to avail the benefit of the composition scheme. So when he violate that terms, so as soon as he violate that term, the option to him to pay the tax under the composition scheme will also be lapsed. So he should and he shall pay the tax under the reverse charge mechanism if he is applicable, if the reverse charge mechanism is applicable. The next question is about the classification of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism. And the question is, who are required to classify the goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism? So we know that the liability to pay the tax under the reverse charge mechanism is of the recipient of supply of goods or services. So it is obvious that the classification of goods or services will be done by the recipients of goods or services instead of supplier of goods or services. What exactly is the classification of goods or services, how to do it, and what are the HSN list I have covered in detail about the classification of goods or services under GST in my other video. Check out the video if you want to know more about the classification of goods or services under GST, and the link of that video is also given down in the description. The next question is about the time of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism. And the question is, what exactly is the time of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism? So, the question is about the time of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism. But before to answer that question, we need to understand the importance of time of supply of goods or services under GST. To find out the time of supply of goods or services under GST is very important to make the payment to the GST department. So, why do we need that? Let me give you an example of why do we need to calculate or find out the time of supply of goods or services under GST. So, the time of supply of goods or services can be happen in case of a reverse charge mechanism in two situations or circumstances. First one is that when we receive the goods or services into our factory or into our place of businesses, or when we made the payment to the supplier, or when we entered that amount in my books of account. So there can be two situations in which we can say the time of supply of goods or services has happened. The first one is that when we receive the goods or services, and the second one is that when we made the payment to the supplier. So there can be two situations, two circumstances in which we can say that the time of supply of goods or services has happened. Let me give you an example that why do we need to find out the time of supply of goods or services and how it impact the delay of payment of taxes to the GST department. So suppose in the first situation, like we receive the goods into our factory on 29th April 2017. When we receive the goods into our factory on 29th April 2017, and we made the payment. We made the payment to the supplier on 10th May 2017. So remember the dates. We received the goods into our factory on 29th April 2017, and we made the payment to the supplier on 10th May 2017. So you should know that we need to pay the tax to the government on a monthly basis. Under GST, if you are not opting for the composition scheme, then you need to pay the tax to the government on a monthly basis. So suppose if the time of supply of goods or services is on the receiving of goods into a factory, then you need to pay the tax to the government on April. And if you found out, suppose if you found out that the time of supply of goods or services is making the payment to the supplier, then you need to make the payment to the department on May. So when the time of supply of goods or services is on the receiving the goods into a factory, then you need to make the payment to the GST department on April. But if the time of supply of goods or services is on making the payment to the supplier, then the month or the month of making the payment to the GST department will be of May. So we can say that we can save the interest, or we can delay the payment while calculating or by founding a time of supply of goods or services. But if you want to know more about the time of supply of goods or services, how to calculate it or why do we need it, then check out my other video if you want to know more about it, and the link of that video is also given down in the description column. But now the question is, what exactly is the time of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism? What exactly is the time? So the time of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism is the earlier of the following three events. There are three events in which we can say that the time of supply of goods or services is that one. But the time of supply of goods or services under GST is the earlier of the following three events. There are three events. So whichever events will be the earlier, that will be the time of supply of goods or services, and you need to pay the tax to the government accordingly. So the first event is the date of receipt of goods. The first event is the date of receipt of goods or services. That is the first event. The second event is the date of entry of making the payment into your books of account or the date of debiting in the bank account, whichever is earlier. So the second event is earlier of the following two events. First event is when you make the entry into your books of account. So how do you make the entry into your books of account? Like when you debit the supplier and credit the bank account. So that is the entry on which you made into your books of account when you pay to the supplier, or when the amount is deducted from your bank account. So whichever is the earlier event is the second situation. And the third situation is immediately after 30 days from the date of issuing your invoice by the supplier. So whichever event is the earlier out of those three will be the time of supply of goods or services under GST. So the first event is the date of receipt of goods or services into your factory. The first and the second one is the earlier of the following two events. First event is when you enter the amount into your books of account, or when the bank is debited into a bank account. And the third one is that immediately after the 30 days from the date of issue of invoice by a supplier. So whichever is the earlier event out of those three will be the time of supply of goods or services, and accordingly you will need to pay the tax to the government. Let me give you an example of how to find out the time of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism, so that you can understand the time of supply in a better way. So here's the following situation in which there are three events. First one is the date of receipts of good. Second one is the date of debiting the amount in your bank account. And the third situation is the 30 day after receiving the invoice from the supplier. And these are the dates against each of those activity or each of those events. So in the first one, the date of receipts of goods in the factory is 15th July 2017, and the date of debiting in your bank account is 20th July 2017, and the 30 day after receiving the invoice is 10th August 2017. So we know that the time of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism is the earlier of the following three events. So in this case, the earlier of the following three one is 15th July 2017. So the time of supply of goods and services is 15 July 2017, and we need to pay the tax to the government on the basis of the July, because the time is of July. So we need to pay tax to the government for the month of July, and that transaction will be paid for the month of July. And in case suppose the time of supply of goods or services was 10th August, then we need to pay the tax to the government on the basis of the month of August. So now in the second situation, the date of receipt of goods into a factory is 20th July 2017, and the date of debiting into a bank account is 15th July 2017, and the date after 30 days from the date of receiving the invoice from the supplier is 10th August 2017. So in this case, the earlier event is 15th July 2017, and the situation was when the debit is happened into a bank account. So that will be the time of supply of goods or services 15th July 2017, and you need to pay the tax to the government on the basis of the month of July. And in the third situation, in which the date of receipts of goods into your factory is 7th September 2017, and the date of debiting into a bank account is 10th September 2017, and the 30 day immediately after receiving the invoice from the supplier is 10th August 2017. So the earlier event out of those three is 10th August, then that will be the time of supply, and you need to make the payment to the government on the basis of August month. So the earlier of the three events was just so that the payment to the government will be earlier. So we have seen in this situation, suppose what can happen, the recipient of goods receive the goods later date, intentionally, maybe intentionally he receives the goods laterly, and he make the payment to the supplier on a later date, so that he can delay the payment to the government. So that's why the government has made the provision like this, that the time of supply of goods or services is earlier of the three events, so that the government can ensure that we receive the payment earlier and there is no fraud or no misleading things happens, so that the government can take the money earlier. That's why there is a provision of earlier of the following three events. The next question is about the valuation of goods or services in case of a reverse charge. And the question is, who need to calculate the valuation of goods or services under reverse charge? So under reverse charge, the valuation of goods or services will be done by the recipient of supply of goods or services. So it means that the GST department official will catch you. The GST department official will catch the recipient of supply of goods or services if there is any undervaluation of the supply of goods or services. They don't catch the supplier of goods or services, they will catch the recipients of goods or services in case there is any undervaluation of goods or services. So suppose the supplier of goods or services has calculated the value of supply of goods or services in the invoice, but you need to also ensure at your point, the recipient of supply of goods or services need to ensure at your point that whether the value as mentioned in the invoice is as per the valuation rule. If suppose the valuation as per the valuation rule of the CGST Act is not proper, then you need to calculate the valuation of that supply of goods or services and accordingly pay the tax on the valuation as determined by the valuation rules or by this act. And the next question is about the issuing of invoice by the recipient of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism. And the question is whether the recipient of supply of goods or services need to issue any invoice or other document in case of a reverse charge mechanism. And the answer is yes. In case of a reverse charge mechanism, the recipient of supply of goods or services need to issue an invoice to the supplier of goods or services. He need to issue an invoice to the supplier of goods or services. In the normal case, the supplier of goods or services issue the invoice to the recipient of goods or services. But under section 31 subsection 2 clause number F, section 31 clause 2 clause F talks about the issuing of invoice by the recipient of supply of goods or services in case of a reverse charge mechanism. So when you fall under the reverse charge mechanism, then you need to issue an invoice to the supplier of goods or services. That will be just an invoice, just a normal invoice. It will not be a tax invoice, receipt voucher or the bill of supply. It is just like the normal invoice which the other person or the normal person issue. It will not be a tax invoice. And apart from the invoice issued by the recipient of supply of goods or services, section 31 clause 2 clause G also tells that when the recipient of goods or services make the payment to the supplier, then he should also issue the payment voucher at the time of payment to the supplier of goods or services. So he need to issue an invoice to a supplier, and he shall also need to issue a payment voucher to the supplier of goods or services under GST. The next question is very important for the reverse charge mechanism, and it is about the input tax credit. And the question is whether the recipient of supply of goods or services can take the input tax credit in case of a reverse charge mechanism. So the person who is paying the tax under the reverse charge mechanism, or the person who are the recipient or supplier of goods or services and making the payment to the government, can claim the input tax credit on the tax paid by the recipient of supply of goods or services. So the answer is yes. But what is the legal provision? What is the legal base of taking the input tax credit? So the legal base of taking the input tax credit is given under section 2 subsection 62, which defines the meaning or the definition of input tax. The section 2 subsection 62 clause number D, clause number C. Section 2 subsection 62 clause number C gives that the input tax include a lot of things. So clause number C says that the tax payable under the provision of subsection 3 or subsection 4 or section 9. Subsection 3, subsection 4 of section 9 is about the reverse charge mechanism. So in the nutshell or in the simple language, the input tax include the tax paid on the reverse charge mechanism. So it means that input tax, the definition of input tax include the tax paid on the reverse charge. So the input tax credit is the credit of input tax. So if the input tax include the tax paid on the reverse charge mechanism, then it means then you can take the credit of tax paid in case of a reverse charge mechanism. So the answer of the question that whether the recipient of supply of goods or services can take the input tax credit in case of a reverse charge mechanism, the answer is yes, and the reason is that the definition of input tax include the tax paid under subsection 3 or subsection 4 of section 9. In simple term, the tax paid under the reverse charge mechanism. And this is our last question. With this we will wrap it up, and the question is whether there is any implication of the reverse charge mechanism with the return filing. So the question is, if suppose the recipient of supply of goods or services is paying the tax under the reverse charge, then what is the implication of the reverse charge to his filing of return? Whether there is any connection or the implication with the filing of return? And the answer is yes. Section 38 subsection 2, which deals with the furnishing electronically of detail of inward supply of goods or services, also says that every registered person shall also furnish, which is furnished in the electronic form. So every registered person shall furnish electronically a detail of inward supply of goods or services on which tax is payable under the reverse charge. So when a person who is paying the tax under the reverse charge shall also have to include the detail of inward supply of goods or services on which the liability to pay tax is on the basis of reverse charge. But what exactly is the form, or when or how to file the detail of inward supply of goods or services? That is also a question. So I have covered in detail about what exactly is the inward supply of goods or services under my other video, which is termed as registration under GST. If you want to know more about it, then you can go there and check out that more about the inward supply of goods or services under GST. Go check out the video if you want to know more about it. Alright guys, so thanks for watching the video. There will be more Q&A in this very channel, so make sure that you subscribe the channel and share this video and all of my video to those one who don't know about the GST and wanted to know eagerly about the GST. And you can also send me the query by sending an email to sharwangst.148@gmail.com, sharwangst.148@gmail.com. The link of all of my video which I have referred in this very video is also given down in the description. And I have also covered in detail about each of the practical aspect of the GST in my separate videos. Check out the video and explore my channel for more knowledge about the GST. Anyway, we will meet in the next video. Till then, bye bye.